We took a look at Adobe Camera Raw and some of the basics of Photoshop. I had mentioned earlier about Adobe Lightroom, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on Lightroom, but I figured it would be good to give you the basics of it because it is a good tool for those who aren't really interested in Photoshop but want to do some work in minor work with photos, but also organize their photo library. It works very similar to the iPhoto on the Mac or Apple's Aperture is the big competing product Apple has, although Aperture has been discontinued as Apple continues to focus more on the consumer market rather than the professional market. So this is a space where Lightroom pretty much dominates the market. Um, so uh, Lightroom is part of the Adobe Creative Suite, um, along with all these other um, Adobe products. You may or may not have Adobe Lightroom on your computer. It was not a requirement for this class. So you can follow along here and play around with Lightroom if you have it. If you don't worry about it, but this is still to familiarize you with it in case you might want it. All right, so we're going to open Adobe Lightroom. So this is what you see when you open Lightroom. Basically, whoever it's licensed to, my name here, there's this space called the Navigator, Catalog, Folders, Collections, Publish Services, um, places you can publish your photo to. Um, that's basically your organization area. Up at the top, we have Library, Develop, Map, Book, Slideshow, Print, and Web. Today, we're only going to be looking at these first two, Library and Develop. Over here are your tools, um, and there's no photos here. So we need to start by bringing in a photo. To do that, we go to File, and then Import Photos and Video. I do that, and it wants me to select a source. So I'm looking at my hard drive here, and I'm just going to go to my Dropbox because whenever I take photos with my iPhone, they go straight to my Dropbox. So I do that. Pops up some movies I've taken and a bunch of still images. By default, they're all checked. I don't want to bring them all in, so I'm going to uncheck all. Then I'm just going to select one, like this one here. This is Ty, a friend of mine, who's also a photographer. So hopefully she won't mind me using this picture I took of her. I click and import that. And there it is. As you can see, it was upside down, and Lightroom automatically made it right side up. Down at the bottom, there's a way that you can rank the photo. Um, Basically, you have the ability to give it between 1 and 5 stars. It's down here in our all the photos would line up here in the strip at the bottom, so I could choose which one I wanted. I only have one here, so I'm gonna right click on that, and I'm going to set a rating and give it a 4-star rating. I really like this, and you can see there it is. It has 4 stars. You can go through all of your photos and rate them, how much you like them, and you can even choose to look at only your 4-star photos or only your 5-star photos, 4 and above, 3 and above, whatever. Anyway, so here we have it. Now, if we want to start doing something, this is just the library. If we want to start doing some work on it, we need to double click on it to open it up. And here it is. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take this photo and we're going to turn it into an illustration. I'm going to play around with some tools here in Lightroom to create what might be the illustration for a web article or what might look like a cover for a DVD or a book or a movie poster or something. In other words, I'm turning a photo into an illustration, which means I'm going to degrade the photo somewhat in doing this, and I'm okay with that. I don't want this is more of an artistic exercise than a strict photography one. Again, I'm using an iPhone photo, so it's not something that I took with my DSLR. Funny thing is, I was hanging out with another photographer at this bar, but neither she and I both had like 2 or 3 DSLRs in our trunk of our car. But here we are in the bar and just using iPhones. So anyway, what you want to do when you start playing around with these images is you have the ability to rank them down here and to crop them here. But I like this whole image. I like the composition that I created here. In design, we often don't want symmetry. Perfect symmetry is often boring. So I tend to go for this off-center look. Some people refer this as to the rule of thirds. The subject is on 1/3 of the occupies right along this third line. And then if you were to put another third line, it would be right about here. So this is 1/3 of the photo, that's 1/3 of the photo, and this is the final third of the photo. All right, so now let's take a look in Develop. Develop is Lightroom's way of saying stuff you would do in a darkroom if this was a darkroom. Click on Develop, and then we can look over here, and we have a bunch of tools pop up here. They are a histogram, which sort of gives you where all your lights and shadows and colors are. As you can see, it peaks toward one end. The ISO was 80, a 4.15 millimeter lens, and f2.2, 1/30th of a second. You have some basic tools right here. They're very basic: a brush tool, a clone stamping tool. This is a red eye correction. She doesn't have red eye. There's also pet eye. If you take a picture of your cat or dog and it's reflective, you can use the pet eye to correct it, but we don't need this right now. So we're going to look at basic. All right. So what I want to do here is I want to create a sense of loneliness. As you can see, she's sitting here drinking alone with a whiskey sour and a Pabst Blue Ribbon here. So what I'm going to do is mess with the color temperature. Now remember, color temperature, we're talking about color temperature for art here, with the yellows and reds being warmer and the blues being cooler. We want to make this cooler. I don't want it to be a warm image. I'm trying to get across the idea of something cool. Change the mood. See how the color changes the mood here? We've just changed it to a lot more blue. -33 on the temperature. The tint, I'm not really going to mess with that too much, but maybe slide it down just a little. -10. Exposure, it's very bright right now. The image is very bright, so I want to reduce this exposure some. This has a couple of effects. It darkens up the background and separates the subject from the background. here we have all these people being social here in the background, and we have her sitting alone at a table. Um, and then I can even do this a little more here by grabbing the contrast and upping the contrast a little. Not too much, just a little. So about +7. This crushes the blacks a little more, makes the people in the background a little less visible. If I undo it, you can see that was before the exposure was done. Exposure, contrast. Undo the contrast, redo the contrast. You can see it also sort of pops her tattoos and her eyes and her jewelry. So, and then we can mess around with the sliders a little bit. Maybe take the highlights down just a tad. Take the shadows down a little. Now, when you see that, that is clipping. Basically, it's letting us know that the blacks are crushed. So I'm not going to mess too much with the blacks. They're already crushed enough for my taste. I'm going to leave that at 0. And then the presence softens it up if you take it to the left, which is great for glamour stuff, but I don't want this to be a glamorous photo. I could pull it to the right, which would sort of do a little bit of an enhancing here, sharpening. Vibrance would add more color. I'm actually pretty good with the way it is right now, so I'm going to leave that alone. And saturation, desaturating it, of course, would take it down to a black and white, and saturating it up would really make those colors pop a lot. I don't really want to do too much of this either. I'm going to take it to, about a +5, just a little bit there. So that's basic. Now, if these controls look familiar, they should. It's essentially Adobe Camera Raw. Lightroom allows you to organize your photos, but also duplicates a lot of the same functions as Adobe Camera Raw. However, there are some people who just do photography and aren't really interested too much in the digital side of things. So for straight photographers, Lightroom is a good tool because it's not as resource intensive as Photoshop, and you don't have to use quite as powerful and expensive an application to get stuff done. All right, gonna look at tone and curve. Basically, this allows you to adjust the curves very specifically. You can play around with this. It's essentially just like curves in Photoshop. You can play around in here, but basically I'm going to leave it the way it is there and move on to HSL color B&W. If you remember, HSL is hue, saturation, and luminance. We're going to go there. We're going to start with hue. So I open that up, and there's all these different hue sliders that I can adjust as I see fit. I'm not that interested in messing with most of these. Red, orange, yellow, magenta, but I am interested in the aquas and the blues. So I'm going to grab the aqua, and as you can see, if I take it down too low, her tattoos are a little bit too greenish. So I'm going to bring that a little more to the blue, and I'm going to take the blue and do the same thing, more toward the blue. There we go. Saturation. Again, same thing. Go to the blue and tweak it down a little bit. Luminance. Okay, so I want that cherry there to really pop, so I'm gonna up the red a little bit and bring up the blue a little bit. And that's pretty much what I want to do with the color here. Split toning, basically it allows you to do different tones between your highlights and your shadows. I don't want to do that. Detail, yeah, we could sharpen it up a little bit. I want to make things a little bit on the sharpened side. A good rule of thumb here is if you want to create a warmer, softer image, you would obviously not sharpen it. You would go for less sharp, and if you wanted a more harsh reality like I'm going for in this image, I would go with a little more sharpening. So noise reduction luminance can basically add some noise reduction there. Uses the luminance to soften her features, which would be great if I was going for a glamour shot. I'm not. I want to keep that all the way at 0. Color does the same thing with the color. I'm just going to leave that at 0. Lens correction. So all camera lenses change and distort an image one way or another. And the iPhone is no different. So built in here are filters that help correct or optimize for different lenses. So what I'm going to do, remove chromatic aberration would be if you had an image where there was a highlight that was the wrong color somewhere along the side of a, if there was like a magenta line along her arm, I could go in there and remove the chromatic aberration. But I'm not interested in that. I'm going to enable profile corrections here. And I can work with it individually, distort the image, and change the different hues. Maybe I wanted to make the purple hue greater or less. I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back to the profile. So basically you go to correct for your lens distortion using the pre-built filter here. You go to the lens profile and you find the make of your camera. Since this is an iPhone, I'll just go to Apple, and it automatically knows it's an iPhone 6 using the built-in 4.15 millimeter lens f/22. So that's basically the camera profile. Now, I can undo that so you can see what kind of distortion happens with a iPhone. So let me undo that. Undo is Apple Z, the Command Z button pressed together in combination. Or you can go to Edit, Undo, Edit, Redo. Redo is Shift Apple Z. So I'm going to redo it, undo it, redo it, undo it. So there's a little bit of color difference, but the main thing that you'll notice is that as things go toward this vanishing point here, they sort of distort toward the middle there. Undo, redo, undo, redo. So you can see it brings her eyes into a more symmetrical orientation. This side of her face was sort of being pulled downward. You can also see the floor tiles of the bar as you correct for the iPhone lens become more symmetrical. Okay. So that's lens correcting the lens. Transform basically is a way of distorting your whole photo. I'm not interested in distorting the image, but you can play around with it if you want. I'm going to go to the Effects tab and take a look at this. Highlight priority. I'm going to leave that pretty close to what it is. I might take it down just a smidge. And then grain. So I like grain. I want to make this a grainy photo. So I'm going to increase the grain a lot. And that would be all the way up to 100. I'm going to go about midway, about a 50 on the grain. Now, as you can see, it's really made the image grainy. It's distorting it a bit, but I don't care because I'm not interested in a realistic photo. I'm making an artistic illustration. Dehaze, I don't really want to change this, but just to give you an idea what it would do, it would create a haze or less haze. There's not much haze here to dehaze, so I'm just going to leave it at 0. You can highlight in these boxes and type in the number. And then camera calibration. So you can adjust the shadows, tints. I'm not going to mess with that too much, maybe just a little bit. And the reds. Again, you have RGB sliders. The greens and the blues. That's basically it. I'm going to go in and do some more minor adjustments here. So if you do Apple plus and minus, you can zoom in and out. I'm going to zoom in on her face. You can navigate around by clicking and dragging the box here in the navigator. So basically, I like the fact that she's got some bruises and character to her face. But say I don't like this particular blemish here. I can go here and click on the spot removal tool. And it works the same way maybe clone stamping works in Photoshop. I choose a brush size. That's about the size of the blemish, so that's great. And I can feather it and choose the opacity. I'm just going to leave them as they are. And then I'm going to option click someplace that I want to choose from, and then click here. And then where do I want to draw these pixels from? I like this area that's very close to it, but just below to the left. So I'm going to grab those pixels and replace these pixels with those pixels. and say done. Now, as you can see, it's left a little hard circle there. So let's go back and feather that. Undo. Feathering will tend to make it less prominent. And oops, I didn't mean to click there. I want to click there and choose from down here and feather it out to soften the edges of it and say done. And that's a little bit better. Now I'm going to zoom out, and I'm pretty much done with what I wanted to do with this image. But we can see what it looked like before and after by going down here. And you can see the before and after on the left and the right, or the top and the bottom. I have it default to left and right. You can also look at it before and after splitting down the middle, before and after splitting top and bottom, or on top and bottom, or splitting top and bottom. I prefer left and right, so there we go. So before we had this nice warm image, a lot of people hanging out at a bar, very orange, yellow colors. Now I've turned it into a much more moody picture here with this final image. So the last thing to do is to save it. So this is non-destructive Adobe Lightroom, so it never affects our original photo. Our original photo is saved exactly the way it was, but we want to save our new version, so we say export. And where do we want to export it to? I'm going to my hard drive, to my desktop. I don't want to put it in a subfolder. I'm just going to leave it right on the desktop. And then I'm going to rename it to Thai001. I want the JPEG extension in lowercase. Click export, and it should have appeared on the desktop. There it is. I can then open that with something else like preview to take a look at it. There we go. There's the finished photo. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Lightroom. If you have Lightroom, I encourage you to open it up, play around with it. It's a great way to deal with a lot of photos. Say you've taken a whole bunch of photos at a wedding and you want to select just the best ones. You can even publish them in a book or a slideshow by clicking on those. But I think that's enough for today. So there goes Lightroom. I'm going to quit Lightroom, and I'm not going to back anything up.